Hopefully it's James.
Definitely that's coming.
I'll go ahead and blind myself up here. All right.
It's a nice hum and
Ready,
it
Mike?
also gives off warm.
I'll just talk about it. Good. All right. So welcome everyone to the first Triangle Serverless in quite a long time. I want to take this time just to say thank you for coming, and I want this to be kind of a soft reboot for the group. We've had some logistics issues lately about getting locations and stuff like that, so thanks to IBM for this, providing the space, the food, speaker, pretty much everything, and allowing me to just get up here and talk to you guys for a few minutes. One thing I did want to kind of throw out there is that next year, a couple of us are looking at doing a serverless RTP, RDU, or serverless days RTP type deal. And so, just trying to gauge people's interest in, going to that. If you have any kind of, if you have company hookups that would possibly sponsor to help make things affordable for people wanting to go, things like that, that'd be great. If you have anything you'd like to talk about as well, feel free, right? Just come and talk to me, talk to Josh, and we'll make that happen. Another thing is that Josh and I were discussing this, and we were thinking about doing something kind of like a monthly thing where we would get together and code a project, basically. And so with the serverless side of things, we would, code, the back end for some kind of a front end project to use. I don't want to name any names because I've been talking, but it hasn't gotten very far yet. But basically, we would do the back end, the other group would do the front end, and then by the end of this whole thing, we would have a full project, right? We would use something, relatively agnostic like the serverless framework so that you could deploy your back end anywhere you wanted. If you're interested in that sort of thing, again, let Josh know, and we'll look at doing that. And I don't know, does anybody have any questions? All right, well, I would like to pass it on to Carlos Santana, not that Carlos Santana, but for his introduction to Knative, or Knative, sorry.
I heard people call it Knative, or I call it Knative. I like strong K. For some people, it's silent K. But, I don't know. Kubernetes, everything is hard K. My name is Carlos Santana. I'm going to talk about Kubernetes. I think I met some of you guys last time that I talked in this meetup group about OpenWhisk and IBM Cloud Functions. This is another project, open source also, about serverless, so I'll be talking about that. I work here in IBM. I'm an SDSM for the serverless compute area. Been in IBM for 16 years, doing serverless for the two and a half years. So I've been in the serverless space and learning, and still learning a lot about that type of compute. And this is an interesting project because it's going to start merging different compute services, and it's not going to be a microservices or serverless or functions. It's going to be a spectrum. So it's very interesting. It's getting very, very interesting. So Knative, it's about Kubernetes. Kubernetes is a orchestrator of containers. There's different ones out there, but the majority of people and the market and the different solutions have standardized around Kubernetes. Kubernetes is very popular. We support it in IBM. So Knative is about making the serverless solution native to Kubernetes, so that's kind of where the name came from. It extends Kubernetes, so it doesn't try to replace Kubernetes. That's why I said it's a spectrum on how to use this type of compute services. So it tries to extend Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an open platform with open APIs and for the purpose of being extended by anyone that wants to extend it. It could be an operator, it could be a vendor, it could be someone just using it on premises. So it's extending it. So that's kind of the idea. Good. Question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is the native part of Knative a misnomer? Because the industry is familiar now with a lot of, React Native, etc., talking about native as being a targeted environment instead of a virtualized environment in a device.
Yeah, it's not related to anything like that. It's, the native the native comes from native to Kubernetes. There are other serverless open source projects that they support Kubernetes, but they support other areas. It's also you can deploy without Kubernetes. Knative they want to be like anything that is done is extending Kubernetes, so they don't want to reinvent the wheel. So that's the native part. Nothing about hybrid or React Native or things like that. It's funny. I'll bring it up to the team. The audience. So the audience for this project is folks that are familiar with Kubernetes, but there will be folks at the top level, like developers. So the developers that are building applications, like using functions as a service or typical other like paradigms that you write a function, you write a set of functions, and you deploy them. You don't worry about the operations. So eventually, those users will use it, and operators will use it for Kubernetes. And it also provides a PCO, which is a service mesh, also part of the Kubernetes ecosystem for all the benefits of EC2. But this is not a EC2 talk, so we can spend a full talk talking about EC2. So that's kind of the audience of Kubernetes. So it's assuming that you have a Kubernetes cluster, you'll be installing Knative on Kubernetes, and then as an operator or vendor or like a cloud provider would extend it even further to offer you a consumable service on API that it could be functions as a service. So that's the reason that we are in this project. Also, part of Kubernetes where you can run it on premises, private, dedicated, those type of environments. I have a question.
So I'm not familiar with this deal. What exactly you said? Service?
Service mesh.
Oh, mesh.
Yeah, mesh. It is in charge of, I think, observability of the different microservices, making it simple to adjust how services talk to each other, doing tracing, doing sidecar injections, so the developer doesn't know that those things are there, but they are actually there wrapping their code and making it secure, and then shaping the traffic and securing the traffic. So IBM supports it out of the box, and Google and different partners are using that.
So, as far as I'm aware, Kate is a architecture agnostic, platform architecture agnostic.
The what?
Kubernetes.
Oh yeah, okay.
is agnostic to the architecture you're running. It's basically supervisory on top of, but now you need to be cross-compiled and prepped for that. So SEO and Knative, how does that play in terms of getting a supported version for an architecture? Like if you were interested in ARM and wanted to see it better developed,
yeah,
and you do multiprocessing and microservices on an ARM-based architecture, can Knative be ported to that, or and is it ported to that?
It doesn't need to be ported. It just works with, because it's extending Kubernetes. So if you have a Kubernetes deployed on ARM, let's say you have it running in 4 Raspberry Pis.
Is there a build? So I don't know. Is there a build portion to Kate's that new packages are part of the extension?
I'm pretty sure all those components of Kubernetes are compiled on all various platforms.
Windows, they're Intel based, the CPU. Let's take it at a CPU level. Intel CPUs are supported out of the box. Everybody uses it like that. Intel x86, but the images, the Docker images that they produce, the container images that they can produce it out AMD64. Be used for those types.
As you can imagine, IBM cares a lot about, say, Z platforms and power.
Yeah.
So we make sure Kubernetes and all those various components can compile on most of the platforms as well. And then we have teams that are dedicated to producing Docker images of the popular packages, not just Kubernetes, but the packages that run on there, like Nginx, all your software.
Right.
Are compiled for those platforms and make it available.
And like platform as a service, you must also have a problem with taking advantage of a non-heterogeneous, or rather a heterogeneous environment where you might have a mixture of ARM and x86 processing environment and maybe even GPUs and stuff. I don't know. But
we worry about all that stuff, yes.
Yeah,
But it's slightly off topic, yes.
yeah, well, I just, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the net is, yeah, you can run it on Raspberry Pis. That's ARM. The building blocks for Kubernetes, remove those options here. See, this is Kubernetes. I want to show the Knative because it's not a Kubernetes project. But in Kubernetes, you can jump ahead. Is about stateless and immutable. So one thing that Knative is focused is once you create a function that's immutable, it takes your code, and I'll show some of the building blocks. Actually, the next one is takes your source code. It helps you build the Docker container or the container image, and it stamps out the hash of that image. So if you know that it doesn't change, that's the revision that you're shipping. It's audited. And if you modify your source code, or even you deploy the same code again, since these images are based on other images, at the end of the day, it could be a different image. So there will be a different hash. So at the core, that's something that I really like about the project. And the other aspect is it takes advantage and benefits from what Kubernetes already offered around 12-factor native application, or we also call it cloud native applications. So the Knative building block, and this is something that I'm not going to talk much. Well, yeah, building blocks. This is I was thinking building versus. So you take a revision. So remember what I said is immutable. So once you have a Docker container or a function, it doesn't change, but you have a revision of that. Then you have a deployment, and then you have a replica set. These are like terminology from Kubernetes, but basically at the end of the day, you have multiple containers running your function. So as more workload comes into your function will scale out into more worker nodes. So you have a fleet of worker nodes. In this case, when I say you, it means whoever is operating the Kubernetes service or the Kubernetes backend. Maybe you are a developer and you never know how many worker nodes that cluster has. For example, IBM Cloud Functions is using Kubernetes, but we don't expose that to users. In terms of revisions, this is how you define, or when you deploy your functions, every time you deploy a function, you get a new revision. So by default, there's a latest revision. Other platforms as a service offers functions that you don't have a label or a tag. This is the default, but I have version 1, version 2, version 3, so you can move that feature around. And the same thing happens in Knative with serverless. You will have different revisions of your Knative function, Knative service, but you have a configuration saying this service has a configuration and it points to a specific revision of that function. Once you have a new revision, maybe you made a patch update or fixed a bug or has a feature, then you go to your CI/CD pipeline, and that will generate a new version or a new revision of your function, and then you can go say to the configuration, please point to the new version, to the new revision. We call it version, but it's actually a revision. Then you have a route. So the idea with the route is to create a service that you can create a route that says the configuration points to the revision 5, now when incoming traffic, so this is similar to API gateway type of operations, synchronous invocations. So when a function call comes in, somebody's visiting your website, it will come into a route. It could be a gateway, we call it different names, so it's a gateway. But there's a entity called route. What is the route? It will go to revision 5. But the one aspect that is very, I'm going to highlight one of the things that I really like since I've been doing this 2.5 years. One thing that we do in microservices in Cloud Native is once you have a new version of your application, you don't want to go 100% like on a Friday, you do CI deployment. But when you promote this code, you don't want to go full 100%. Because you may have a problem, you may have bugs, you cannot sustain that workload. So what you can do is just say, okay, I'm going to enable 5% of the users or incoming requests to go to revision 5, or revision 4 or revision 5, so you can slowly do a promotion or a deployment of your function. Once you feel confident, says let's go 100% and everybody uses the new function. Or if you want to roll back, it's easy to roll back. And that's configuration that you do in Knative out of the box. And this is kind of like explanation what I did. You create a configuration that points to a revision, and then a route references a configuration and a revision. Then you create a service, and the service in Kubernetes is the building block or the component that is it's a service, it's a microservice representing the code that drives your traffic is a service. So if you don't have a service, nothing can get into your cluster. But the service will point to a configuration and it will create a route. So it would automatically detect this configuration that you want, and then it would configure itself to the instructions that you have in the configuration. And in Kubernetes, the native language is an API, but you define it through YAML. One thing that I didn't cover here, if you don't have a background in Kubernetes, Kubernetes is a declarative deployment model, saying that you don't say that you want to deploy something. You say, I want the state of my application to look like this. And then Kubernetes has the master nodes and the configuration, and that's the job of Kubernetes. Always make sure that what you want is always present. So if you say that you want a service with a configuration with a route, and maybe you want this scale or number of containers, Kubernetes is watching everything, make sure that if something reboots or crashes, it will restart it again, make sure that that state that is there, it's met. It's not a configuration and then you have to validate if it got configured correctly or not. So that's at least one benefit in terms of deployment with Kubernetes. Source-centric. So I think I mentioned something about this is some providers or some solutions don't focus on the CI/CD pipeline. Kubernetes has a building block that is the Knative building. It's composed also, there's a new one called Knative pipeline. They're working on making a better version of building to make a pipeline. They went to a refactoring. So the previous building was using init containers and didn't give enough control over the logs, over the steps. So they're working towards the pipeline. So, and I'm going to demo that today because the new version will come out around January, the new version of building.
When you do the building, does it still involve a registry?
Yes.
It does?
Yeah.
So you push, after you push like a git, commit, it will go through, do the build, and then at the end, you'll end up with an image that can be deployed. So that still happens?
Yeah. So the idea, and that's a not a Knative thing, is a Kubernetes thing. Kubernetes wants a location where do I retrieve this image, and it's a registry. People can run a local registry that synchronizes with a remote registry, or it could be Docker Hub. Like for example, I think I have images here. So that's the steps. It takes source from GitHub or a different source, and it supports out-of-the-box Git protocol. It's like Knative. This is not Kubernetes, this is Knative. You will give it like, here's my Git repository, here's the credentials, go, and it will convert that source code following some steps into an image, which at the end of the day just push into a registry. But you as a developer, you work in terms of source code. And it creates a workspace, and as it goes through the workspace. So anyone familiar with Jenkins?
Yeah.
Okay, so those are the terminology of CI/CD pipeline. Go ahead.
So, what you're describing, it seems like in your production system, you've built in a CI/CD DevOps kind of process, and that build process is innate to your Knative environment. Am I reading that correctly?
It doesn't have to be in your production cluster. This could be a separate cluster just with the component of Knative that is in charge of building.
So is Knative like Jenkins CI/CD and DevOps in terms of developing your product, and then there might be a production case that would be agnostic or not care about Knative existing?
Yeah.
Okay.
So people,
Okay.
so the solution out there, so that's why I ask people know about Jenkins. There's a new project called Jenkins X, and it's going to be, a Jenkins serverless. So you don't have to have a Jenkins server or find out that you need always a server and maintain the server. It will be on demand. You have a Jenkins file, and it will use Knative to implement that Jenkins functionality on demand. And like you said, the building part of Knative, maybe that's the only thing that you need. You don't have to use Knative. This Knative will help you with Kubernetes take source and convert it into a.
The reason I ask is because there's a lot of people that talk about air gapping their development environment from their production environment, and they don't want any development or build process over on their system that is running it.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, someone like IBM Cloud or a cloud provider will have a cluster just to provide CI/CD services, and that will be a different cluster from the cluster that is running the production workloads. A little bit through the building blocks is, so it's the same process. You have a workspace, and then you have different steps. So every step we use like artifacts that got created from the previous step. So you have to run it on a workspace. So there's a disk that is shared between the steps. At the end of the day, it's using a build template. So again, with extensibility. So we don't dictate. Knative doesn't dictate how you have to build your code. It provides a framework that they can be build templates to take source code and convert it to an image. So for example, there's a project, let me correct, it's in incubation, the build packs. The buildpacks.io, you go online, that's that came from Crowdfoundry and another people. It's a project, and they offer a build template that will take just source code sitting in a Git repository, and it will detect that it's Java or it's Node or it's Python, and it will take that code and convert it to an image. There's another one called Code, which is also another build template. So the different companies are building different templates for that to run that Jenkins, call it Jenkins because we use Jenkins a lot. But that's CI/CD pipeline. So that's the example that was saying. Buildpacks, but also Canico. I think the short name is called Canico. Jib is for Java. It's a very modern way. A lot of people is adopting it. If you're doing Java development, take a look at Jib. Jib will become the way of taking Java code, put it in source code, tell configure Jib, and Jib will take care of doing all your builds and packaging that into a container. So you don't have to worry about that configuration yourself. That was I explained serving, building, and then the third pillar of Knative is eventing. So eventing deals with taking a source event and delivering that to a service. So a simple delivery is you can configure an event source, let's say a webhook, like if this then that. You can configure Knative to go to if there's this and that, and then call directly your function. But what we want to do, and this is kind of what I was telling today, that in the documentation they put complex processing. I think we should change that name from complex. It's actually not complex. Maybe it's just eventing processing. This is how just eventing works. So eventing will take an event source, and examples of the event source could be a GitHub webhook. So something happens to GitHub, somebody push code to GitHub, somebody puts a comment in GitHub, like a special slash validate or slash run some code, and that will send an event into the system. Other ones could be a database, like HTTP, MySQL. It could be cloud storage, like S3. It could be just HTTP. Timers, so that's another one that I'm looking into. Cron jobs. I want an event to be fired every Friday at 6 p.m. The event fires, it sends the event and then actually runs a function, and the function does something very important. At Fridays at 6 p.m. it tells everyone in Slack that we have beers, right? So that's very important. We have to go out and beer. So that's the example. But the idea is that we made it, let's say the Knative project made it very composable. So the source goes to a channel, and a channel can be in-memory channel, and there's a Kafka channel coming. So the source just takes information and makes it into a channel, and the thing that Knative is using is I would say a specification or work group from CNCF, the Serverless CNCF working group. They came up with a specification on cloud events. So that's a schema, and that is being standardized, so hopefully be standardized everywhere, that provides compatibility across vendors, across projects. So if somebody's talking about events or cloud events happening in compute, we're all talking the same language, the same schema, how we package data, how we transform data. So in Knative, if a source doesn't have that, it will go and transform that, provides an SDK to convert that into a cloud event. That way, you don't have vendor lock-in. So if you want to move to a different cloud or a different framework, you can go and move because your function just works with cloud events. So you have to use just another tool or switch another tool, or get a new version of the tool, and you don't have to worry about what is the events going to come. And it's like a typical example is when you're processing application JSON, and they say, okay, I'm going to keep a collection, and then you walk away, and you guys never talk about, is it going to be an array, or is it going to be a map? And then, how do you know? Well, send me an event, and then we'll expect it, and then, so we standardize this to make sure that events are consistent, and by a specification, and the specification will have versions, and everything's versioned. So it has the best cloud native experience out there. Then the next step is the green one, which is a subscription. In other frameworks I open with, we call it a rule. So the rule and the subscriptions are kind of the same thing. When there's an event coming in, I want you to run my function or run the service or send an HTTP request to my service. And that's the top one. The bottom one is something very interesting that the Knative team is doing in terms of eventing is, I want that you can configure declarative saying, this event calls this function, but my function is going to take that event in and produce a new event that I want you to send to another channel. So it will be able to compose a, as we call it, callable. So you will call this function, get a cloud event back, and then take that cloud event and send it to the next channel. And since these things are composable, this channel just happens to have another subscription that sends to another function, or it is compatible, and then you can have compositions and kind of an ETL, processing, mapping events or running events, and shaping that event into different things. So these are right now, I call it primitive, that we can build into more abstraction layers that is better consumable with tools like DSLs and UIs and things like that. But this is like the foundation.
Did I miss it when you said earlier that Knative is not based on something like AMQP or RabbitMQ? You're basically kind of putting an abstraction layer on some existing, message queue or like 0MQ. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of ones. Is this so? Are you guys coming up with your own protocol? What I'm wondering is how does this jive with the whole Kubernetes API? Is it part? I mean, are you going to be going through an API server with this? How does this stand as related to Kubernetes and existing things like RabbitMQ or AMQP or 0MQ? How does that work?
Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. That's one implementation is Kafka. So the channel is these are Kubernetes pods that are going to implement this eventing. So about the API server. The API server is just used for configuration, saying I want to declare the subscriptions and the channel, but there will be an implementation behind that channel. And that channel today, we have two reference implementations. One in memory one, so if you reboot, you lose the information, but it gets buffered. The second one that got submitted by a contributor is Kafka. So if you reboot the server, it gets in there. And we hope that we get people from 0MQ, from RocketMQ to implement the same channel so you can interchange one for another one.
Is it still, it's still the same protocol?
Kafka uses one protocol.
But so you're actually speaking the native protocol with the SDK?
Of Kafka?
Yes.
Yes. So those things that say channel receiver is using, that implementation is using a Kafka producer, connecting to Kafka. That Kafka at the bottom is just a Kafka server, regular Kafka server from Apache Foundation. And then the channel subscriber is a Kafka consumer, so it's consumer events. If you want to do something like 0MQ or RocketMQ, you will replace those three items into a Kubernetes container and CRD and say the channel provisioner, we call it channel provisioner, is going to be in RocketMQ, for example. That gets deployed, but the other pieces don't have to change. The event source for GitHub doesn't have to change. The subscription doesn't change how dispatching those events, because that buffer, that boss, is not in charge of dispatching the events, is not in charge of taking GitHub webhook and transforming them into cloud events. So it's very, you can replace that with another one. And the team is trying to build kind of a framework, SDK and documentation to help other people to build more extensions, so more event sources and also other boss. I don't think we will see that many bosses. Like you said, it's like.
So the channel receiver is there's the abstraction layer that changes from cloud events to Kafka.
Yeah.
And then subscriber changes it back to cloud events before it goes to the server.
I think it's the other way around. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think channel receiver receives things as
cloud events,
Kafka, whatever, in whatever protocol specific the producer's producing, and then it gets converted to a cloud event before it gets passed on to the rest of the infrastructure.
Yeah, so let me show this. So in GitHub, it's webhook, so that comes as an HTTP, and it's a JSON payload, and it's HTTP, but it's not a cloud event. So there will be a container called receive adapter that will take those HTTP requests, and then there's a, what I try here, but it'll be a sidecar that he will talk to localhost through HTTP. And then that piece is part of Knative. They just give me an HTTP localhost, it's a sidecar injection, and then this thing will send this, actually, this kind of the channel receiver. It will receive this information and then produce this Kafka. So this will be HTTP into here. This will be TCP Kafka. This is a Kafka server. And then the messages are just sitting there. Somebody needs to consume them. Then on the channel subscriber is the Kafka consumer. So that's TCP pulling messages from from the different channels, right? So there'll be like one topic channel 1 and then another topic channel 2, pulling messages. So this thing here will be Kafka information, and then these two guys will talk HTTP to localhost. But because they don't know what is the next step, we always like just talk to localhost and we'll give that information. Localhost is just a container, so this will be HTTP, and then this will be HTTP out to your service. That matches your. We went through this afternoon. I remember. Go ahead.
So my understanding is Kafka is not just PubSub, and so it's not all subscribers get the same message train. There's a distribution or fan out, and Kafka's managing that. For what he's talking about, 0MQ and Rabbit, etc. Those are just PubSub, and so there's some logic in how the messages get fanned to the right worker services. It's like essentially a new distributed ETL kind of concept where Kafka is actually doing some higher level servicing for you. Does Knative depend on that behavior?
No, not on Kafka. There's a in-memory implementation, and you don't have to use Kafka. Good question. I think actually that was the explanation. I think I'll work with Evan from Google to do better slides.
Yeah, I think the key thing is actually the sort of legend at the bottom, where it says the blue arrows are cloud events,
Yeah.
the green arrows are protocol specific. So that's why you notice that the Kafka stuff.
Yes, Kafka protocol, Kafka.
Right, but before it gets handed off to your service, it gets converted to a cloud event, and that's when sort of the standardization comes into play. So the service, your function does not necessarily need to know how the event got delivered, whether it's Kafka, MQTT, HTTP. It's abstracted at that point by the time it gets back to the function.
Yeah. Yep. And like other services, it's typical. We want to go down to the bottom of it. At the end of the day, this is just a post HTTP with JSON. Or later it could be GPRC or the other different protocols. But right now it's just HTTP.
This is what I didn't understand. The cloud events was actually a standard. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
That guy is responsible. So if it has the wrong version, or like we did last week, you changed the version string and we have one and you guys have another one. We have to fix that.
Yeah, 0.2 is about to come out next week.
Yeah.
Tomorrow we're going to approve it, so yes, the version.
Okay, so we need to stamp that new. I want to pick up the new stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we're like whole family, like all the vendors. At the end of the day, we all talk to each other and help each other out. So yeah, so that's eventing. How are we doing with time? Horrible, right? Let's continue. I think that's it. Those who are the three pillars, and they can be used independently. Let me go back to how this can be used independently. So, for example, you may not be using the CI/CD portion of Knative building. You may not be using the Knative serving in here, but you may be using eventing. So, for example, if you want to process events from GitHub, and you want to have a, or maybe something else like IoT events, and you want to deliver them into a different service. So maybe you want to send them to a Lambda API gateway, right? Or maybe you want to put this into a database, or you want to send this to OpenWhisk as a trigger. It doesn't have to be Knative right now. It assumes that it looks for this information, but the idea is the next version of the Knative eventing is to make this generic. It's just a URL. Just give me a URL where I need to send these cloud events. And maybe the next step is just it could be a Kubernetes service, not a Knative service, just a Kubernetes microservice that you have. Maybe it's a VM that you have somewhere with a server. Or it could be a different provider with something Cloud Foundry, right? So we're trying to make it composable at the bottom. I just wanted to highlight that the purpose is to make those three things work together, but also work independently. I think that's it with this group. There's demos? Somebody wants to see a demo? Or just go home without a demo?
I have a couple of questions. So you said, I mean, so some parts can be interchangeable. So like from CI/CD pipeline. So if I already have my CI/CD pipeline in place, I could, generate the image using that. The question was, so the language that is used for creating the function, is it Java or is it like what? How do I write
the function?
Yeah.
In any language you want.
Okay.
We have examples in the repo, the hello world. I was looking at this just today. If I can exit, I'll show you now. It's a container. It's running. So for example, the venting, that container should be running, should accept an HTTP post.
Right.
The port is exposed, so you don't have to worry about the port, but it needs to be a web server. The build packs help in terms of, I was talking here, where's the build packs? Here, the build packs, that the build templates are called build. How do I call build packs? Oh, because that's one implementation. Build templates can help you, like if you, for example, I've used Lambda or other serverless functions as a service. You sometimes don't write a server code. You don't even know what HTTP or server listening. The build template can just say write a function in Go or JavaScript or Python, and then the build template will take that function and put a wrapper web server around it, and then create the Docker image, and you never knew that your function is being inside a web server. So the build pack can do that. Your code just we just need to go with a specification on that. Also the serverless framework, right? There will be a serverless framework plugin that you say the YAML file is specify where my code is, and the plugin will take care of building your Knative function.
Sure. So then I was like, if I have to compare and contrast this with something like OpenWhisk, like why this over that? Because I mean, OpenWhisk is also something similar, right? Like it provides me the framework for creating functions. So why would I use that or this over?
You would use this one or OpenWhisk. OpenWhisk is an open source,
Right.
so you can use either or if you're doing functions. This one you would use if you already using Kubernetes.
Right.
The other benefit of Knative is concurrency. So OpenWhisk give you the concurrency on one, so make sure that always one function is running serially. Knative has the knobs that you can take that safety net out and say, like, I know about web servers, I know about concurrency, I know how to manage memory. Let me do more transactions per second, and you may use this one. What other things? OpenWhisk team is working with Knative, so there will be collaboration on both projects to bring the best out of the two and benefit each other. So when you say using it, I don't know if you're trying to build something in your house to run with servers, or you're trying to just pay a few cents a monthly to use it. So if you are like trying to just use serverless and you don't want to build yourself, use OpenWhisk like Cloud Functions, a vendor, or Lambda or Azure, though you don't have to do operations. If you are going to work with servers, then look at Kubernetes. OpenWhisk can deploy to Kubernetes. This also can deploy to Kubernetes, but this is a project that got started. It got open source around June last July. So it's growing to maturity. So if you have requirements like GDPR or SOC or those type of things, I would go with OpenWhisk right now until this gets more mature. But Kubernetes is mature, so it depends how much knowledge you have in the different aspects.
Yeah, so the use case is on-prem. So we have a product that has to be deployed on-prem. So we were just trying to explore the service use case. So like, I mean, we were looking at OpenWhisk at that time, but this looks very interesting because it's supported by Kubernetes, and our platform is container orchestration layer is Kubernetes. So that's the reason.
Yeah. So if you already, the thing is, if you're using Kubernetes, this is just easy to deploy. It's a plugin.
So, in serverless, I think one of the most insidious problems that I think we've talked about prior to this, OpenWhisk, and has kind of resolved this, is the latency issue of your functions starting in a distributed environment and a virtualized environment. And so, does Knative do anything similar to OpenWhisk in terms of minimizing the latency of getting your function executing if it's not already being hit in a series of messages? Or is there an expectation that these pods are running and remain running, and if I'm running on somebody's cloud, then they're going to be built for them continuously?
Yeah, so you brought up a good point that I missed is in OpenWhisk, we have the knowledge, and Knative can build this. It doesn't mean that it cannot build this. OpenWhisk is open source. But currently, the current state, that's why I wanted to talk about current state, because things change so fast. So the current state, OpenWhisk, have a pool of warm containers. So the latency is very low because there's no time spending bringing these containers up. It's just inserting your code and go. In Knative, the scale from 0 to the first one, it takes around 10 seconds, right? 7 seconds. If you have a latency requirement that you need 200 milliseconds, then this is not going to work. Out of the box.
Keep alive technology of keeping some of them warm yourself in your own custom environment.
Yeah. So I was going to say this is the out-of-box configuration. You go into the YAML and say, I want 3 pods of my function always to is scaled to 1, and it will be scaling to 1. If you have 1,000 functions and you have 3 of them, right, it will be 3,000 pods that you'll be using that over the weekend maybe they don't get used. So you're wasting that. So the team from IBM and also Google, actually next week we're going to meet to talk about this topic about how do we make scale to 1 instead of, I think it's right now 6 to 7 seconds, to less than a second. Yeah. Right? How do we write more code? How do we instrument? What are the things? What are the bottlenecks? If it is still, if it's the ingress, what are the things that we have to get there? And I think we're going to get there.
Do you view that problem as though something that you guys can work on and add on to an existing Knative, or I don't know about OpenWhisk and whether they did thoughtful consideration of that problem, but I know that is, I think that's the primary concern for people using serverless is, a stalled first contact, where it takes 10 seconds and the person hits the back button before you.
You go online and search for the cold starts versus a warm start. The thing is, you have to see it through a lens of who's using it. So it could be that you are playing with serverless and you hit this cold start, but then you talk to a customer that is doing 1,000 requests or transactions, and they will tell you like, my website is always, there's someone in my website, I never get a cold start because there's someone always using the service, right?
Well, I've gone to a lot of DevOps meetups, and they're a regularly run meeting, so they're always talking about operations, and they often talk about platform as a service and cloud-based stuff. So when they're discussing AWS, and there's a lot of advocates over in the particular people who run that, they're always talking about adding functionality to their app so that they're doing a warm keep live process to make sure that their latency is low for their transactions. So
which is a bad practice.
Yeah. Well,
if you ask me, that's bad practice.
Well, if you understand your environment, it's not. Because they'll minimize their costs that way. If IBM and Google will negotiate what Knative will do, and you'll say, well, we'll go from 6 down to 3, or we'll go from 10 seconds down to 1 second, and you need sub-second, then the answer is you need what you need in real time, right?
Yeah. But the net is we'll have technology and we have guys and we'll get it below 1 second. or even better.
What's nice about that though is if you solve it with Knative, chances are they'll solve it for Kubernetes itself.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, you know, one solution out of the box, especially if it's an open solution that's platform agnostic, is great for us, you know, businesses that are going to treat cloud as a commodity.
Yeah, Kubernetes has had this performance problem for a while now, but it hasn't been a top priority. This forces it to be a top priority,
Yeah.
which is really nice.
Yeah, Kubernetes is, you know, you're deploying from 3 to 5 replicas. It takes a few minutes for the pod to come up. Once it's up, it's not going down. Like Kubernetes will maintain that up. That's why it's not being a concern. In here, we're trying to maximize that server, that utilization. Like every gig of memory and every CPU needs to be busy in a multi-tenant way. Like share that resources. So good conversation. So let me start the demo here. I was going to show, somebody was asking about what languages. So for, this is Serverless. This is Knative. So if you go to Knative, can you see that? Mm-hmm. Okay. In the docs, so the team is working, we have some folks working in the docs. We'll hopefully have a knative.io website, but right now the documentation is in a repo in Markdown. But this is instructions how you install it. The prerequisites is that you have to have a Kubernetes. It could be in your laptop with Docker for Mac or Minikube. It could be IBM has you push a button, say, give me a cluster of 3 nodes or 2 nodes or 1 node, and you get the Kubernetes. All the providers has the same way. So we have gone for a long way for Kubernetes to make it like that simple. I get a cluster, I configure a CLI, I have a Kubernetes like anyone has a Kubernetes. So that's the requirement. Under serving samples, you will see a lot of hello worlds here. So you can see that. So we will have Closure. Somebody knows Closure. C#, Dart, Elixir. What is Elixir? Go, Haskell, Java, Kotlin, Node.js, PHP, Python, Ruby, Rust, Vertex. Which language do you want? COBOL? We have COBOL in Autobooks, by the way. But
I didn't see APL or K up on the list, so.
this is GitHub.
Not as
PRs, right? A lot of people have submitted PRs, so if you can submit a PR if you have an example. And these are very, very small examples, like actually hello, so it get you started. For example, the one I'm going to show today for serving is anyone is familiar with Go, the Go language?
Yeah.
Okay. It's becoming popular. Or maybe it was popular and I'm the one discovering like now the Go exists. So I started from Go 1.11 and up. So maybe I'm a new in Go. So this is, go ahead.
Is there, I know I just did a comparison of Rust versus Go in terms of cross-compiling and embedded systems. And Go's reliance on LLVM and the clasp as a portability layer in terms of cross-compiling really made it fly in that example. Is there any dependency on cross-compiling? Like tool changes is bad news, and it seems like Knative is going for a mixed environment, as we talked about earlier, and that's what's important to me. Is it embedded in a mixed platform environment, mixed architecture environment? So, is Knative agnostic to you setting up your tool chains? It's like back-end CI/CD work and that stuff as an exercise to the installer.
Yeah, it allows you give as long as you give Knative a Docker image or container image, it doesn't care how that image came from. The thing is that the Kubernetes that you're deploying, you're running that Kubernetes, that node, at the end of the day, you're going to run Docker run or container run, which is the new thing. That container needed to be built, like you said, for that architecture. Yeah, it's independent. for Go, this is the code for Go, is a function that handles an HTTP server, it's a handler for an HTTP. If you have done, for example, OpenWhisk Web Actions or Lambda API Gateway, there's a lot of frameworks that give you the ability to write a function and then handle it as a web service. It's similar. So this one will print hello. We'll get an environment variable. That's the thing that also Knative supports environment variables. And it will say the target hello and just say hello world, or the environment variable value. This is just a standard HTTP Go thing. I guess the Node.js, I can show another one for Node.js. I don't know what other languages you guys like. There's no one for Node. I thought it was Node. Okay, Node. Node should be very that simple also. It's using Express. Anyone familiar with Express? Okay. So Express, you write routes, and then say I receive console.log, which is send out, process the environment variable, and it says hello world. So I think that's the criteria for these samples. So if you go to contribute one, that's the spec and gets tested end to end. So make sure that it works. That is, all the samples are doing the same thing. So I have here. You guys can see that, or it's out of focus?
It's white. That's actually much more.
No?
It's not.
Okay. So I did it with Minikube. I'm going to do it locally, but this is the same process as your container is living in the IBM container service or Google or any other provider, or your own on premises, and you said. So I should have the kubectl set up here so I can do version. So I'm connected to, I'm using, I don't know why this thing doesn't bring it earlier. I'm using Kubernetes 1.11, yeah, 1.11, CLI 1.11. If I do, people that are not familiar with Kubernetes, this is kind of like bread and butter of you doing Kubernetes. This is the CLI that you use. IBM is working on a new one called, what we want to pronounce it, QUI?
I like Q personally.
Yeah, this is here, so I can have a shell here. All right, I can do kubectl get pods, and I have my pods in there. So I have a Kubernetes environment cluster, and I'm going to show you. I already did it, so I did it beforehand. I'm going to install Knative and what it will take to Knative. So I'll post this in the meetup chat once I post this in like a gist or something. You guys can copy paste it on the slides. These are the instructions, and this is from the docs. So I just picked up commands from the docs. This is Carlos' way, which I like. So I'm just creating a Minikube or a VM, VirtualBox, 4 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM. Make sure that you have a little bit more than, you have 8 gigs or more if you want to run all the Knative building blocks. The Knative is releasing, I don't know why this thing is not running. Okay. So it's releasing, if you go to GitHub to the release, there's a YAML file. It will install Istio. Istio is that service mesh. So that will be step 1. The second step is to install serving and build. If you don't doing CI/CD stuff, don't do build. Just do the serving. So you will grab this YAML file and get that. And basically just for Minikube, you have to replace where it says load balancer into the node port, and then kubectl apply. That's basically, you deploy this YAML files with kubectl apply. This week I was asking around, somebody already started the work of Helm. Anyone familiar with Helm? People use it to deploy, people use it to generate YAML files for the templates. Also, I was asking around this week and just preparing for KubeCon next week, so I want to be like ready to answer all the questions. Customize, that's how you pronounce customize with a K. Anyone familiar with customize? Customize a project out of the Kubernetes. Helps you with merging YAML files, so you have different environments. You can like join them together, and then they give you a good YAML file. Go ahead.
You just evoke another question for me, which is easy. The OpenShift and people who have customized Kates, does Knative work in those environments just as well, like an OpenShift or a mini-shift? Will it run your Knative environment and not need a bunch of customization or specialization?
Yes. There's instructions in the docs for knobs and the specifics to that Kubernetes environment. So if you go to installing Knative, this is the list. So you're looking for this guy.
Yeah.
OpenShift. So mini-shift, like OC. Is Red Hat the company that we bought?
Yeah.
I think you've heard of them, yeah.
Yeah. No, the thing is that the Red Hat developers have worked with us in OpenWhisk, and now the Red Hat guys are working with us on Knative. Still working on OpenWhisk, working on Knative. I guess we're going to work together more. But yeah, these are the instructions. Like this is IBM. If you can use IBM and set up a Kubernetes cluster. I believe we have a bit here or something. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. But yeah, Kube is Kube or Kubernetes. It runs anywhere, and that's how you deploy it. Once you deploy, you can verify that these are running. You can do a kubectl. We go new terminal here. I think I was using this. Right? So serving is installed. Can you see that?
Could you tell us the name of that tool one more time that you're using?
Oh, the tool is brand. How old is it? Is it?
Questionably cool. AUI. IBM.
You think we'll find it?
Actually, I think it will.
QUI shell.
Can I use it for like, anything like, even
Yep.
CKS and all that?
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Like I said, you can use it against certain CLIs, like group control and KN control. KN control, yeah.
Yeah. If you're a OpenWhisk user, this is the same technologies like shell, Electron shell. Also works on a website that we use for Composer to compose functions, right? You want to create a function that if this function is false, runs the other one and create compositions. But it's also a nice shell grids. So we want to build it into a Kubernetes project, CNCF project.
Basically, it's a UI for Kubernetes.
Right?
UI for Kubernetes.
No, for the
Case for Kubernetes, the UI is just user interface. But yes.
content
UI for kubectl.
kubectl.
Yeah, good call. Yeah.
So it just takes the output, the YAML output or the JSON output, and makes it look really nice.
A little more than that, but yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more. It can scrape ASCII, so it would know, it will detect what is the ASCII that it's putting out, and also also if, for example, I have here, this is not the demo, by the way, but so I can add, these are the files that I have. So for example, I was showing how to install Knative. I can open the YAML file. Let me see, where is it? I can open the other one of these guys. I can open, let me open this one. Yeah, so this one will open your YAML file, you see colors and anything like that, and then it will detect this YAML file and give you like a form representation, so it's easier to type values or change values and configure, validate that your YAML is correct, that you didn't put 3 spaces instead of 2. I've done that. Who have done that? I spent like an hour like, where's the thing, like syntax is like 2 spaces instead of 3. Anyway, that was great. We love it. Everybody loved it. Fine. That's, yeah.
It's Pythonic, so all the people who hate Python too.
Yeah. So There's a tool out there, the Kubernetes, the Knative project recently decided that we wanted to do a CLI. Actually, we wanted to create a client library so it can be used to create CLIs in Python, in Node, in Go. This is a project from a person from Pivotal that created like a prototype of a CLI. So it helps you kind of like that developer experience instead of dealing with kubectl commands. So it's an abstraction layer. So for example, here, so once I deploy Knative, if I want to create a function or a service, I will do a knctl deploy. The service is going to be called hello, and the image that I'm going to use is this hello world go. So these are the examples I was showing before. We already have these images deployed in a registry, so you just need to point to them. Easy to get started, but like before people were asking, do I need to build the image, or how do I build the image? At the end of the day, you have a Docker container, you do Docker push it, put it in Docker Hub, you can put it here. So let's deploy this function. It will do all the things that I talked at the beginning. It will create the configuration, it will create the route, it will create the revision, it will create the deployment pod, and it's up. That was fast. Maybe have the image cache. The image is very small. Can you guys see the output of this?
Yeah.
So I can do a service list, and I can see I have another function in there I was playing around called message dumper for the eventing, but this is the one that I was working on. It's called hello. It's hello.default.example.com. So you can set up a domain name and then map that to your function. So it looks like it's up. If I do kubectl get pods, I should be able to see it. So it's there and running. If I don't do anything with it, it's revision 2, like I was talking before. I already did one deployment, but this is the second deployment. So there's a 0.02. By default, I think on this one we set it to 2 minutes. So if in 2 minutes I don't use this function, the pod would get destroyed. It would just leave. Right? It's gone. And then if I try to access the URL, the website, the pod will spin up again. So the next step is if I want to use the nice coloring thing, I can put pod list service. It will say that it's running. And if I want to do a curl, anyone familiar with curl? Okay, I use it a lot. People use it.
So what's responsible for spinning the pod back up if it dies, or if it's destroyed? Is that something that Istio does as part of the service?
It's part of Knative in conjunction with Istio, the Istio gateway.
Like add like a hook saying if you go to this URI, then go ahead and make sure there's something up. If there isn't, then go ahead and have the order spin.
What I'm hitting right now, I just call my function. Nobody clapped it. Like I did a demo and it worked. So basically, I was going to explain what it did here. So it's running a curl postman. It's going to that IP address, which is my cluster on that port, and I'm passing the domain name. So everything's going to one ingress gateway. That ingress would, it's an autoscaler. Yeah, we call it autoscaler. So there's different pods that you will see that it's running. So there's Knative pods running that will make sure that when that request comes in, it will tell Kubernetes saying, hey, you have pods, and then the pods will come up. The pods will report metrics. Based on metrics, it will say, oh, you have too many requests, or if you are saying, I only want one request at a time, it will get more pods. If more requests are coming in, as things stop coming in, the autoscaler will come back and say, I don't need that many pods, go ahead and do downgrade the replicas until like everything's gone. So I can keep running. I don't have a script. I should write a script to run this thing like hard, so you can see many pods coming up. So I can do a get.
You can do what?
While it's running. Or yeah, watch, that works.
Like that?
Yeah.
Just
Every 2 seconds. I can No, I need to do like 1,000 requests per second or something like that, right? That's how many I have to do. But anyway, Let me see if I don't think there's nothing to it. But anyway, I have, so this is what you're asking. So you can see that under the hood, you can see, give me the ingress list. So that's the ingress gateway that is receiving the packets, the HTTP request.
So that's Envoy?
Yeah, it's still. Envoy gets into the box. Gateway is still gateway.
Oh,
and then you can get the logs using this tool, so it's nice. So you can see like the console.logs or the printf from the Go app. So I can be running that in one window and then calling the next one. But I'll move to the next.
so why does Knative have its own kernel? Why can't you just use Kubernetes API, just use like custom resources?
Sorry?
Is that what it uses? Is it using like, does it have its own custom resources?
Yeah, we use CRDs. So basically if you do get configurations, I think it is. That's the configurations. If you do get routes.
To
So this is what you were talking about earlier.
To answer the question, though, you can use control. You don't have to use K and control. They create K and control to create a nicer user interface for those who just want to do it. Here's a function, go deploy it for me. I don't want to learn all about Kubernetes.
Yeah, for the CLI. In terms of CRDs, the reason we created CRDs is easier to manage the parameters. So when you create a CRD in Kubernetes, you are in control of those input parameters that you put in the YAML. You can have control. You can have a controller for a CRD to validate that all the inputs are correct. And that's a CRD. You can have a controller next to it, to a CRD to manage the CRD. So if I create a configuration or revision, there needs to be code that configures that stuff. So there'll be a controller when the webhook comes in saying a route just got created, a configuration just got created, an event got created. So that's why you need the custom resources. I'm going to create a second resource, a second function. I'm going to call it, actually I'm going to redeploy it again. And let me see, yeah, I can create it again. I think I already did that. Since I can call it another one, I can call it. I'm going to create a blue-green deployment. Anyone familiar with blue-green deployments? Basically, this is how you roll out, spending the 5%, the 10%, and then just roll out the whole thing. So in this one, I'm going to create a deployment, and this is basically automating the different kubectl commands that I have to do. I'm going to create a first version of my app and deploy that. So it's deploying a new revision for my app, call it first. And then I'm going to set it like, and the reason I use this managed route false is telling it, oh, don't create a route yet. I'm going to create a route and I'm going to give you the percentage that you should send to that route or label. So in this case, it'll be the latest one. So it goes to 100%. So every request will go to the first one. Then you can create a second version, like you have a new promotion next week. You can roll out the second version of it with a different environment model. So this is a proof that it's actually two apps running, two versions of the app running. And then I'm going to say, put 90% to the previous one, and the new version, now that it's latest, put 10%. So we can slowly roll out the new version to see if the new users don't have any problems. Also, there will be a domain name label that you can say. It will give you a URL that says, I want to test the new version directly because I want to test something before I just go full. So you can go to 0% and then try it out. And then I can run, say, 10% and 90%. And then I can, with this, did I did the route? Show the route. So I can do a show route, and it will show me that, where's the percentages here? You guys see that? So now 10% of the traffic will go to 004, 90% is going to 003. So I'm in this stage of, I'm doing a promotion, but it's not fully, everybody's not sent to the new version of the app yet. And it's doing that traffic assign And then the last thing I'm going to do is try to, using watch, call the app, and it will hit the first version, until, I guess, every 9 requests, and then the 10th request, it should show the second, it should actually flip to hello first to hello second. And no claps. I'm a horrible presenter.
What's handling the update?
Go, two questions at the same time, so let's really running to work.
What handles the update of DNS externally? I noticed that you have an internal, DNS that's coming from QDNS, and then you got the internal one. What's doing that? What's the mechanism for that? Is that something that Kubernetes would do?
That's a Kubernetes thing, and I don't have a DNS external because I'm hitting, as you see here, I'm hitting an IP address in my computer, so I'm not really, I don't have a domain name set up, a CNAME and everything like that. But if you want to do that, there's no Knative way of doing it. It's just Kubernetes ingress DNS, and then you get a domain name routed here. And as when the request comes in, every request has a header host.
So
it will drop
you're
it.
still using ingresses even when you're doing 2%?
Yeah, it's still.
Yeah. But I mean, there's an ingress and there's Istio, because I use Nginx with an ingress. So, but Nginx doesn't have anything to do with DNS. How does that stuff get updated?
It's Kubernetes. I'm not very familiar how DNS works in Kubernetes, but this is using Kubernetes and Istio. So
He's
that's
actually using DNS.
I know,
Yeah,
I get it. I
Okay.
see the host line curl. What I'm understanding is if I wanted to go and deploy this, as I might, how is it that I go and make it so that it updates my DNS automatically whenever I spin up something like this? When
this will not update your DNS
It's
server.
running a router underneath the covers, an
You go-
intelligent router that's routing the package. It's not just DNS. It's you're getting the DNS server is going to a front end like Nginx, and it's routing the packets to the back end server.
Yeah. So then there's documentation on how to set up Knative DNS. I can send you a blog post. He goes over the steps of going to Google domain names or IBM domain names, and you put your, I think it's called either the CNAME or the IP address. AWS has the same thing. How to configure that IP address?
Let me sure we get his question. So is your question about how to set up DNS, or how is the internal routing happening? Which one is it?
Are you using like T-SIGs with updates to the DNS server? Are you actually using the DNS protocols to update the records, or are you just providing an API that you have to plug into?
Everything you showed has nothing to do with DNS.
Yeah, nothing. No, we don't configure DNS.
Now you can set up DNS.
But Knative has a way of doing DNS.
No, this routing has nothing to do with DNS. This routing is simply under the covers. It looks at the host header from the HTTP message and say, oh, it's going to a function called foo, router over there.
Yeah,
That's it.
the ingress gateway of Istio. Istio has an ingress.
So what is the dependency on Istio? So if I don't have Istio, I can still do a general ingress object on Kubernetes, and can I map it to the function there? Do I need to have Istio installed?
Today you need Istio to get Knative serving working.
Oh, okay.
In the next near future, it will become optional.
Okay.
Okay. I have another question.
The DNS thing is taken care by Kubernetes take care of that DNS.
Kubernetes has kubedns internally.
Okay.
Kubernetes doesn't go into your Google account and update your DNS records, A records and TI records.
Another question about 10%. The request going to 10% whatever service. Where do I find out that? Like, can I go and check the logs and see which request is going to 10%?
You can check the configuration. I will tell you.
And configuration is fine, but so people are using some requests are going to 10%. How do I figure out these requests are going to 10%? So by checking logs.
You can check logs. Also, you can have syncing. You can do a trace. But logging is, I think, the best way. Just log. Your apps will be logging which version they're running, and then you collect all the logs
Okay.
and see the metrics. Also, Grafana with Prometheus, you can do a metric. a metric saying, you know, I'm running and you see two graphs. Yeah, there's different ways of doing it. Kubernetes. I think those are two standard ways like logs or Prometheus. I think I prefer, if you want to do something visible, easiest way is Prometheus with Grafana. Let's see what else I have here for showing. Good questions. You guys think, I didn't think people were like this Kubernetes thing. I thought serverless guys only want to deal with code. No.
I run it in production, it works.
I noticed that you use the route. You use kubectl get route.
Yeah.
Is that the OpenShift object route, or is that a different route?
What?
Is that the OpenShift object route?
There's no OpenShift here at all.
So what is the API version of route you're using?
The API version of the route.
Like probably ECO.
So okay.
I don't know what it is.
Why? No, I'm sorry, I don't understand the question. So we have Istio gateway. Your request goes to that, and that goes into a Knative route. This is a Knative route.
Okay.
That maps to the configuration that you have, and then the configuration says which revision of the function do I need to run. Does that make sense?
Yes.
When I do kubectl get routes, that's a Knative CRD called route. We just call it like a very generic route, but it's probably should be called Knative route. Knative route.
I can see conflict with the OpenShift route if people just decide to deploy that on OpenShift, because then there's going to be a conflict.
There's an OpenShift route.
Yes.
I can take a note to talk to Ben and ask him about what he thinks. This thing should be called K route or something like that. Right? That's what you're referring to.
Yes.
Yeah. And you will see it here when you open the release lines and you look for route. See, these are the CRDs, the resources routes. So I don't know if the OpenShift is called OC route, or we change this to K route, but good feedback. I think, how are we doing with time? Yeah, this one is building, and we can leave that for next time on how to get a build CI/CD pipeline, because that's in the works. I think that's it. I went through an hour or two. I think less than that. If you have a Kubernetes cluster, then it's 2 commands to install Knative, and the commands that are run is you need to get the CLI. If you search for in Google KNCTL, first link, that's the CLI helper type of thing. But again, a new one is forming. This one has a blog post. I think somebody was asking here how to add.
Yeah, that's what I was.
So that's the answer for that.
Awesome.
And it will go I'll tell you, like, you create this, and you create. Actually, KNCTL has domain list, the internal resources, and at some point it tells you go to your configure Cloudflare or Amazon DNS, and then put your stuff in here to point to your cluster, and then you have hello full.com, and then runs your hello world. But these guys, actually this is a good page. They can CTL, they have a blog post for all those things.
Yeah, but it's important to note the DNS stuff that you're talking about there, that's completely outside of Knative.
Yeah, it's Kubernetes, yeah.
See, I didn't realize that, so there's something called external DNS for Kubernetes, which can talk to Google's DNS or we designate. So I guess that's what
IBM has, I don't want to sound like a salesman, right? But IBM Cloud has good certificate manager, where it would renew your certificate, your SSL certificates, and it will also has custom DNS. So it will manage all those things for you and renew them. You can use Let's Encrypt to generate new ones and DNS, and that will work with custom domains for functions, serverless, or Kubernetes, something like Knative. So you can use that. So we have services that make your life easier around Kubernetes, certificate manager, also like scanning your images. You have a registry, you push them there, and it will tell you like, hey, we found a CVE on this image, block the deployment. You actually fix it. You want to block the deployment if you find CVEs, security problems. and then tool chain and the different services that we have in IBM Cloud. I think that's it. Questions?
You want to scroll to it. Yeah, thank you.
Carlos, did I hear you correctly when you said that the build was starting to take on some of the things that, was it Jenkins X has?
Yeah.
So,
No, Jenkins X is built on top of Knative.
oh, okay. So Jenkins X is the build.
Yeah, Jenkins X is the new Jenkins. So you go to Jenkins X, is going to be the new Jenkins, and it has Sprout support, which is good. It's a good blog post. The guy introducing Jenkins X. This one goes over the different teams, has a demo, CI/CD pipeline, GitOps, preview environment, and all this is building on top of Kubernetes. Kubernetes is becoming like, you want to get something done, don't research, like use Kubernetes, right?
But correct me if I'm wrong, I think your question might have been slightly different. If you're asking about this Knative's build, I don't think there's a relationship there. I think what you're talking about, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this Jenkins is going to use the function infrastructure, function to service infrastructure to do its to do the Jenkins processing.
Yeah.
It's not that Jenkins is going to become that build mechanism that he was talking about inside Knative. That's two different things. All it says is they're going to functionize Jenkins.
Yeah. This is serverless Jenkins X. It's going to use, it could be meta, right? So I want to use Jenkins to build my Knative functions, because that's what I like to CI/CD. So you can use Knative twice. You can have Jenkins X, Jenkins file, and this is how I build, make it, and this is how I tell Jenkins, hey, deploy, take code, validate it, compile it, verify, run tests, and at the end, push it into a registry. And then Knative can use it, right? More questions, or we can do it one by one, one-on-one?
Any other questions? Thank you, Carlos.
Okay.
I think we still have some pizza, and a reminder, we do have a meetup, the Kubernetes meetup tomorrow. If you guys want to come back and join that. Thanks to the Serverless guys for letting us host.
Yeah, thank you.
Did any of you all know what's